Hey everyone, welcome back to KC3D Sparks. Today we're going to be making a swinging log trap. So I was kind of inspired from last week's saw blade trap. So I thought it'd be cool to add another trap to this hallway, kind of like a Skyrim inspired one where it is on metal poles that swing down directly from the ceiling. Of course, if you wanted, you could do rope ones that come off the walls, that kind of thing. And we can always go over how you would just make those variations briefly. But I'm just going to grab this one hall piece. So, I mean, every 1 inch square is supposed to be 5 feet. So, I mean, that would be, fit at least a 10-foot log. Of course, you could grab more than one if you wanted. But I'm probably just going to stick with this one hallway piece, and then you can always duplicate it with others. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this actual one to an empty layer, and we'll just use it to actually model. I'm going to grab this, and right now you'll notice the origin and the mesh is kind of wonky. So what we're going to do is we're just going to first off do origin to 3D cursor. And if your cursor isn't in the center, you could always do Shift C first to make sure it is there. And then we're just going to do geometry to origin to fix that up. Next, we'll just do Shift A, mesh, and we're gonna do a cylinder. Now I'm gonna go ahead and hit 3 to go to side view and hit align to view. So that way the circular part is this way, and if you go into wireframe view, once we start sizing it down, it'll already be oriented the correct way that we need it. So radius is at 3 inches, depth is 6. I'm just gonna manually size it down. Vertices 32. That's a lot. I don't really want to do that many, especially if we end up adding a subdivision surface modifier later on. I'm going to knock this down to 12. It's a lot easier to work with, and I like to make sure I have one vertice on each side of the axis. I think it's usually a good way to model, and then, you have your bonus ones out here. So we'll stick with that size or stick with that amount of vertices and just size this down manually. Go into front view. And we're going to size along the X to almost meet the walls. I wouldn't mind it being a little bit shorter, just in case. If you want it to be exact, of course, just size it to meet exactly, but I'm going to have mine just a little bit shorter. Now, I'm debating if this is still too large, but we really want this to be somewhat exaggerated anyway for our 3D printing purposes, so I'm probably going to leave it about this size. It's nothing exact, but right now, you can see I just have it almost 3/4 of an inch in diameter. So if you wanted to meet my same sizes, you could always just do the 0.714. I'm gonna go ahead and rename this to log trap, so that way just a little bit easier, keep our outliner nice and neat. And we wanna go ahead and add some details. So I'm just gonna hide our castle hallway, tab into edit mode, and kind of check it out a little bit. Now, if you wanted, you could do Control R, add a loop here, and separate them so that way you can model just one ring of this. And, it'll copy on each side, which I think I'm going to go ahead and do. But if you wanted them to be individual, then just do each side individually. So we're just going to do X to delete those, add modifier, mirror, and we'll want to uncheck X and check Z and do clipping. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and just add a subdivision surface to start working with that as well. And I usually like to crank that up to 3, but that's usually personal preference, whatever you find looks the best. So I'm gonna do Control R and just drag this up. And actually I'm gonna do that again. And I'm gonna size this one down to kind of get rid of that weird edging thing you had going on, so that way it's a nice kind of beveled section instead. And if you want, you could rotate this or anything like that to make it look more like an uneven cut, like it's kind of crude. Or if you want it to look nice and neat, you can just leave it like this. I do want to add a couple notches and things though, so to do that, if you want them to be super dramatic, what we can do is just grab those two vertices and pull that right down, and then we can start altering those. Or what I was thinking might be cool instead, and actually I'm probably going to add another loop here, so that way we have our solid piece that won't affect the rest of the log. Grab these two, and we're gonna do V to rip them apart. Now we're gonna end up making triangles because of this, but it's okay. We're not animating it, and we're just 3D printing it. Everything's gonna be converted to triangles anyway, so it's not as big of a deal. Okay, so now once we have this hole ripped open, what I want to do is hit with these two or these two, either side selected, we can do E to extrude, and I'm just going to pull that down. I'm going to go into side view to kind of get a better angle of what I'm looking at. I'm going to pull that down even more, and maybe even grab these two, pull them back a little bit more. And I'm not trying to make it look super precise. It can be a little wobbly. All right, so deselect those. We'll go ahead and grab these again. And what we're gonna do with those two selected, go ahead and select these two and then hit face. And you'll see it creates that face for us. But I wanna do Shift E to this part here, which doesn't really do too much yet, but that's fine. We're gonna go ahead and select these four, hit F for face, grab this guy. I'm not sure. Now it looks a little messy right now. We're gonna have to sharpen these two as well. So we'll do Shift E, and we might need to sharpen this whole face or whole little section. Okay, and then you'll want to go ahead and select these two and hit J to join that, and we'll go ahead and do Shift E to sharpen that as well, or else we're gonna have that weird webbing because this is such an oddly shaped quad, so that's what we would end up making into triangles instead. And if you want, it might be better to change this into a triangle instead of a quad as well, so it's not trying to make it super smooth. So if you want, just grab these two vertices, hit J to join, and you can even do Shift E again to add a funky crease to start getting your notches in place. And of course, now that we have our triangles there, you might be able to unsharpen some of these, so that way it's a little bit softer and not as, ooh, what is that type thing, if that makes sense. Let's unsharpen that a little bit. Maybe sharpen this part a tad. And it's actually not as deep as I would like it. I think that's not really going to show up too much. So what I'm going to do is do B for border select, grab these two and this vertice, and we're going to drag that down to be much more dramatic. So that way our printer will definitely capture it. And if you want, you could add a couple more of those, or you could do other variations as well. So we could just grab some of the vertices, kind of push and play, so that way it's, you know, again, just a little bit varied, nothing too crazy. But I will go ahead and probably add another notch to this part right here. So again, we'll just do V, open that up. E to extrude, pull that way down, face that off, face that off. I'm just going to go ahead and do J to join right away. J to join, sharpen this whole edge. And sharpen this slightly. And pull that off to the side. Not sure I like that angle anymore. Like that. Cool. So this part's a little bit too sharp. I'm going to go ahead and soften that up just a teeny bit. That's better. Okay, and of course you can go in, keep adding more details. For now, I just want to add the actual poles next. So if you wanted, you could even do multiple bundles of these. So if you wanted to shrink this down and boolean them together, and then you could add a rope to tie around, so that way you had a bunch of individual smaller logs. That could be pretty cool to look at too. It would add, you know, just another layer of detail if you're interested, but I want mine to be one huge solid log. I think that'd be really cool. So we're gonna do this, And I'm just going to do Shift A, mesh, and we're going to do another cylinder. And this will be hole or log trap. Okay. So again, I'm not really going to be paying too much attention to these dimensions, just enough to make sure that they will actually print. But I'm going to be using the sizing of the log to judge how big I want them to be. So we're just going to do S, Shift Z, shrink this down even more, and we'll probably do about 0.85 of an inch is probably decent. That should still print with not too many issues. And we're just going to slide this just like that. Now I'm going to want 4 of these, but I'm just going to model the one first, maybe around here in between the second grid square from the end. So I'm just going to tab into edit mode and zoom in a little bit. Now you could have it just like this, so that way we can just boolean it and move on. But I don't really want to do that. I want to add a little bit of detail. So what I'm going to do, actually tab back out of edit mode and push it so that way it's down here on the y-axis. Because what I'm going to do, tab back into edit mode. We're going to do Control R, pull this down to about here where it's kind of like starting to intersect. And I'm going to do another loop right underneath of it. Border select this one, so we have both of those selected, and we're going to do S and Y and size that in. Because what we're going to do is kind of like how metal poles attach. They'll usually have a thinner part where a bolt will go through. So we'll kind of have that set up. So we're going to have that thinned out. And what we can do is grab this one, do E to extrude, pull this out, size that down to even taper off a little bit. Even do this and size along the X to round that out to look even a little bit better. We can add a modifier and do subdivision surface. I'm just going to leave it at 1, 2. And I'm just going to pull this up so that we have that there. Shift E, or maybe just add another loop to smooth that out a little bit. And I'm not going to actually worry about adding a hole. Now for the height of the poles, I want to go ahead and unhide our walls. Tab into edit mode. Just grab these 2 loops and pull this up to probably this grid line here. So it's right below the walls. I don't really need it as tall. Of course, you can make it as tall again, like I said, but I'm just probably going to make it meet this grid square. Okay, so now what I want to do is push this back again. So that way when we boolean it, it will have a great intersection here. So maybe even a little bit further. And we can add our rivet. Now you could either boolean one in or just model one. I think I'm just going to model one right on here so we don't have like a ton of booleans going on. So I'm just going to grab these 4 faces here. We're going to do E to extrude and size that down. I'm going to do S and Z. I'm going to sharpen that, do E to extrude, pull that out. I'm going to hide our wall so we can actually see again. And we actually need to do S and Z like that. And with all of these faces selected, we'll do Shift E to make it actually look like a bolt. Perfect. And of course, you could always make that a little bit more dramatic if you wanted as well to make sure it really does come out nice when you print it. I'm just coming in here to make sure it will pop through fine. So yeah, that should be plenty of room. Now, if you want your log trap to be straight up and down, you certainly can go ahead and place your poles as is, but I want mine to actually have some movement to it. So it's actually going to reach out of the hallway. So I'm going to go ahead and grab our log and push it out. I'm thinking close to this second grid square out. I don't think I want it touching, maybe just like a 1/4 inch of room in between there. We'll just go ahead and move this back now that we know where we want that. Grab this, pull this back out. And I want to rotate it kind of like almost at the origin point. So what we're going to do, click on it so that way our origin is actually pretty much right on there. Change our pivot point to 3D cursor. I'm going to do Control 1 so I can look at it, and do rotate. So that way it actually rotates right about there. You move it back just a little bit. That actually works pretty well, actually. Yeah, we'll do like that. So now we just do Shift D to duplicate it and pull that back. Now, usually you would think we'll just go ahead, select both of these, do Shift D and just duplicate them and pull them over. But the rivets are on this side. So instead, what we're going to do is do this. We're going to apply our subdivision surface modifiers because we don't need them anymore. We're just going to go ahead, apply a mirror modifier. Let me go ahead and put this back real quick though. We're going to change this back to medium point and Shift C for our origin to be in the center. And go ahead and do mirror. But we also, after doing that, we need to set origin to 3D cursor and do Y. So we'll do this, add modifier, mirror. Oh, I forgot to change the origin. Set origin to 3D cursor, and do Y again. And we don't have to clip clipping or check clipping because there's nothing to clip. Perfect, and it's already lined up just like we need it, so we can go ahead and apply our mirror modifiers. Now I'm going to go ahead and select everything and do Control A, rotation and scale. Just kidding. We need to apply our mirror modifier first. Control A, rotation and scale. Control A, location. And then we'll go ahead and test out our Boolean modifier. So we're going to go ahead, do Boolean, union, and we're going to need 2 of those. We'll do this set of poles first, and then the second. They don't disappear, so I'm just going to go ahead and apply that. And they do intersect perfectly. So now you're probably wondering what we do next, since right now it's still just floating magically and there's no supports in place. Since I personally want this to be in this actual hallway, I'm just going to create some supports right in here. If you wanted this to be portable so you could put it in kind of like any pieces, you can just do supports on its own little stand. So basically by supports, all I mean is I'm just going to do Shift A, mesh, and we can either do cube or a cylinder, which I'm going to probably do a cylinder. Just go ahead and size that down. Be maybe about that size so we can print it. S and Z. Make sure it does intersect both. And that's right in the center. I probably want 2 of these. So I'm going to do Shift D and pull that to about here as well. So that way it has plenty of stability. And of course, if you didn't want this, like I said, you can just create a platform or something, some sort of small stand, or print it out as is and glue it onto its own stand, something like that. But I want mine to just print out with the walls themselves. So we're just going to go ahead, do it to the floor first. We're going to do add modifier, Boolean, union. I'm going to copy it and do our 2 cylinders first. And I don't mind messing up this hallway piece because I have plenty of duplicates, so I'm not worried about duplicating this at all. I'm just going to apply those. Make sure it did apply properly, which it did. You can see this perfect cutout here. And then we just need 1 more, so Boolean. And if you wanted, you could again do Control A, location, rotation, and scale. Apply, hide our log trap. And it cut out perfectly. Awesome. So let's go ahead and hit M, move that back to our layer, and we're going to have to move it around a little bit because we did pop it back to the center. So let's go ahead and put it back into this hallway. this back up. Now I do have some spacing issues here with some of my other pieces, but overall, I do like the design of this. And of course, you could always duplicate it so that way, like let's move this over, Shift D, you want it to be extra long, and you could even just say like it's one continuous log. So it kind of still lines up and all that fun stuff. It won't connect, but it'll still serve its purpose. Let me just undo that real quick. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this easy tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to post those in the comments below. And of course, you know, any requests or things like that, don't forget to like and subscribe so that way I know you guys are enjoying these video series. I will work on hopefully some 2.8 tutorials in the future once 2.8 is out. But other than that, if you want the fastest responses, please feel free to join my Discord. I have a whole Blender help section in there as well, in case if, you know, sometimes I'm not always the quickest with the YouTube responses, but I will get back to you guys as soon as I can, I promise. Other than that, thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week.